Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. Illinois basketball had an interesting week. A week that included a lot of different storylines. We have a ton to talk about here. A 7-point collapse in 30 seconds. 5 subs coming in at the same time against Iowa. I mean, we got it all this week. I'm Kyle Tausk, joined as always by my co-host Mike Farmer. Mike, how you doing? What'd you make of this week of Illinois hoops?
That was a hell of a week, just from odd first half at Penn State, transition to up 10 in the last couple minutes of the Penn State game. And then, as we know, ended extremely poorly. A lot of outrage on social media afterwards. Guys getting called out, coaches getting called out. Crazy week, but then you bounce back with a nice home win over Iowa, putting up almost 100 points against a pretty solid Iowa team who's been playing well recently. So, terrible start to the week, but a solid bounce back game against Iowa.
We're just talking about right before we hit record here that the next episode we record next week, it's going to be March, and it does not feel like that at all. That whole last 3 games in March stretch in the postseason has felt like so far away for so long. Now it's, what's the date today? February 25th, so it's going to be March on Friday. That's pretty insane, and Illinois Hoops has some things to figure out here, and we'll get to all of that. We do need to start on Wednesday night. I know a lot of Illini fans probably don't want to dwell on that. I certainly don't want to think about that atrocity more than I have to. But the problem with recording a once-a-week podcast is that we do get a couple games in between each episode, and even though that one's passed and Illinois has had a nice bounce-back W, we do have to talk about a just brutal meltdown at State College at Rec Hall, which I never want to play another game at that Voodoo Arena again. I knew something was up. I'm like, there's just some weird vibes here. We're playing at this Rec Hall. The students are right on the court. Normally there's like 100 Penn State fans that show up to a game, but we got this thing packed. Something weird's going to happen, and sure enough, Illinois blows a 7-point lead in 34 seconds to Penn State. I think they're up 10 with like a minute 20 left. Just an absolute brutal collapse for Illinois. Everything that could possibly go wrong at the end of the game went wrong. Everything that could have possibly went right for Penn State went right. It was the perfect storm to allow Penn State to completely steal a 90-89 win. How worrisome was that? I know it was a complete firestorm on the Illinois social media fan base after that one, and I don't really blame them. I mean, that was just awful to watch. But what was your reaction to seeing that complete collapse by Illinois on Wednesday night?
I mean, just honestly disbelief, because we've seen some collapses. You know, you go scoreless against Nebraska in the final 3 minutes, they force OT. You end up winning the game. Like, similar thing happens at Michigan State. They go on a huge run in the last 6-8 minutes of the game, whatever it was. Well, you didn't really see anything like that Penn State game that we just witnessed. I think it was in the final 3. Like, I wrote an article about it. It was so bad, just about the state of the team, and I focused on some of the details of the game. It was like the final 3 minutes, you got outscored, I think, 17-7. So they were down 10 and they win by 1, something like that. And then we made 1 field goal, had 2 turnovers. I think we missed 3 or 4 free throws. Like, just everything terrible that possibly could have happened. But I don't think it's fair to only talk about the final 4 minutes, final 2:30 of the game. I think it's right to talk about the entire game. Because you look at the start of that game, and Illinois is down, I think, 10, like 3 minutes in. Like, Quddus Wahab has his season average in the first, 6 minutes of the game. Like, stuff like that just cannot happen. I get it's a Voodoo Magic Arena at Rec Hall, which is I guess you can complain about that a bit, but still, we've seen some of the problems that Illinois has had the whole season still happen at that game. Like, you can't blame the entire thing on Rec Hall. You can't blame it on refs, whatever you want to call out. Like, it made a difference, I guess, but Illinois still has to play better the whole game, the final 4 minutes of the game, whatever it may be. But yeah, I don't know. I was obviously pretty disheartened. I was kind of furious after the game. Like, I could not believe that happened. You miss the free throws with Coleman. He fouls the 3-point shooter, and then you end up getting a decent look at the end of the game that probably goes in 7 out of 10 times. Justin Harmon had a great take to the basket with 4
How much
seconds
different?
left.
How much different would everyone feel if he just made that? Like the whole collapse happens, but Harmon hits a buzzer beater. Like the everything changes at that point.
I thought a lot about that after the game, and my thinking was like, obviously it's awesome you get a buzzer beater win, but still you have to like it helps your record, helps your resume, whatever. It doesn't hurt your resume. Everybody would be happy about that. But I think you still have to factor in
No,
like how poorly you played in the last 4 minutes. You still gave up 89 points, whatever it was, to Penn State on the road, a team that's like barely top 100 in their Ken Palm offense. Didn't have their best player, so obviously it would have helped a bit with morale. Like just not losing that game would have been awesome overall. But there's still definitely some concerns coming out of that game, whether you won or lost it.
no, yeah, you're 100% right. The buzzer beater would have saved the win-loss record and saved the fire Brad Underwood tweets that were being fired off, but it definitely wouldn't have changed a lot of the things that we saw in the game. And really, the way I look at it is like it's obvious that this team has some late game problems. And that's been a trend here the last couple of weeks. And that's something that's going to need to get figured out for sure. But I'm less bothered by collapsing in the manner they did in blowing a 7 point lead in 30 seconds. As weird as it sounds, I'm less bothered by that because it was such a fluky thing to me. Like if you tell me Illinois is going to be up 7 with 34 seconds left in an NCAA tournament game, they're going to win it. That's a collapse that happens once every 100 times, maybe if you're lucky. And that's not excusing it because I think Illinois did a lot to lose. But my bigger concern from the game was, my God, you couldn't guard Penn State for 40 minutes. A Penn State Nittany Lions team that, like you said, didn't have their best player, got kicked out of the program right before the game, and Kanye Clary was leading them in scoring. Nick Kern is going to go 9 for 9 for a stretch of the second half on you. I know he's making a couple tough ones, but just the way that, like, Illinois got back cut 5 or 6 times. Communication was terrible. There were just so many lapses. There were 3 baseline out of bounds plays. 3 baseline out of bounds plays that Penn State got dunks off of, uncontested dunks, where Illinois just didn't communicate a switch or didn't fight over a screen. And you give up 90 to Penn State, and I know some of that came in that late game flurry, but for the first half, it was as bad as I've seen Illinois' defense all season long, amidst a lot of really bad struggles for most of the last month, and that was as bad as it had gotten the first half against Penn State. It was ridiculous. Illinois was lucky to get a 14-point lead in the second half, which obviously you have to close out. Again, I'm not excusing that manner of collapse that they had, but I think that's more fluky and more something that is not going to linger as much. However, the defensive performance is something that's going to linger because Illinois can't guard right now. And I know we'll talk about the Iowa game in a little bit, where I thought they looked a little bit better on that end. But your weekly update, Bart Torvik defensive efficiency numbers, since Terrence Shannon returned, 121st in the country in defense. That's like Kentucky levels. You hear some of the talk about Kentucky, Alabama, how awful those teams are defensively. Illinois is right there with them in terms of all offense, no defense. And you can outscore a team once or twice, but if you're not going to get consistent stops, then that really limits how many games in a row you can win against really good teams in the postseason, and we've talked about that. But I was far more bothered by just how poor Illinois played on defense, and I thought it was pretty much everybody. I thought maybe Terrence Shannon was the only guy who defended at a high level in that game for Illinois. Everyone else, whether it was just assignment mistakes, mental errors, or just a lack of toughness and effort, and we saw that come to play even on Saturday, which we'll get to as well. But that's a concerning trend to me for sure, and I was more bothered by that than I was the fluky collapse, as crazy as that might sound. Maybe a hot take, but I'm much more worried about this defense than I am about a 30-second 7-point collapse that'll happen once every 8 years.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know if I totally agree with worrying about the defense more compared to turnovers, late game situations, because I think they're both very valid complaints about this team. But yeah, Penn State did have to hit a ton of shots. Like still scoring 7 points in 34 seconds is pretty crazy, or 8, whatever they scored. Yeah, they had to hit a lot of tough shots, timely shots. Illinois had a couple nice shots, like in this Iowa game yesterday too. Like they played pretty well down the stretch, I think, compared to Penn State at least. But you think back to the Penn State game, like I'd allow the team like a combined maybe 1 or 2 like failed switches, back backdoor cuts, like out of bounds scores. They gave up like 15 of them combined. Like it was unreal. Justin Harmon got backdoored honestly 5 or 6 times. Like remember that the Purdue game at Illinois a couple of years ago with Alfonso Plummer who got just
Mm-hmm.
torched in overtime and we lost. I
Mm-hmm.
had just disgusting flashbacks to that game. And this was like a much lower stakes game. Like I don't, it was crazy, but just the dunks off of inbounds is unacceptable. The backdoors is just hilarious. And then in the half court defense too, it's just like guys aren't getting over screens. Like if they're not switching, they're not getting over screens. Like guys are failing to communicate who's on who. Like you're not going to win an NCAA tournament game against a decent team with a type of defense like that. I think I agree with you. It was a little bit better in terms of like less mental mistakes against Iowa, but still you gave up 85 points to albeit a pretty good offense. But yeah, there's a lot of concerns about this team with defense, especially being the focal point right now.
Yeah, and I also just thought like they weren't very physical at all. They're just getting moved around to one on one, and they're just the toughness doesn't seem to be there. And it's disappointing because of how many older guys you have. It felt like that entire Penn State game was a game played by a bunch of freshmen and sophomores and not a bunch of fifth year seniors. Both the late game stuff, but also just competing on the defensive end, especially given the fact that we were closing out last week's episode talking about how Ohio State had beaten Purdue. All of a sudden, you control your destiny to win a Big Ten. Next game out is at Penn State, a team who has a first-year head coach. Their star player just got kicked out of the program. They're playing at a rec hall because they can't fill their normal stadium. Like, you got to go in there and play. Like, you can't. It just felt like they fell into a trap of like, all right, here we go. We can coast through this one. We don't have to compete as hard. And the focus just wasn't there. And that's why, you sort of heard some of Brad Underwood's comments after the game and this week about how he had really hard practice and had some tough conversations with some people, namely Coleman Hawkins, who ended up having a hell of a day against Iowa. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, I mean, like Coleman Hawkins missing 2 free throws as an 80% shooter and then going down and fouling a 3-point shooter. You cannot have that from a senior leader of your team. That's ridiculous, especially a guy that's been trolling all over Twitter for a week. Like to come out and do that. I love Coleman's personality. I love his trolling, but you can't then foul a 3-shooter to lose at Penn State then after that. Then I have a problem with it. So it's just you just need more focus from your senior and your senior leaders, and to waste a 35-point game from Terrence Shannon, who looked like the only one who was taking the game with the seriousness it needed to be taken with, was really disappointing. And yeah, late game stuff like Terrence wasn't free from blame either for dribbling into two guys, turning it over. Justin Harmon can't inbound the ball. You got to use 2 timeouts. Like I know some people come back to like, well, here's why not having a point guard is hurting you late in games. I kind of disagree with that. You don't need a point guard to inbound without calling back-to-back timeouts. You don't need a point guard for your senior center to not foul a 3-point shooter. Would it be nice to have one late in some of these games? Sure, but that's just stuff that when you got 4 seniors on the court, that it shouldn't be happening, and just the lack of mental focus for a game that you kind of felt like, I mean, the entire fan base kind of felt like, well, this has kind of a trappy nature to it, whether it's the rec hall or Penn State. Just, they've given some teams a rough time. They beat Wisconsin at home earlier this year. It felt, at least to me, maybe I'm speaking for more people than I should, at least to me, it felt like you better play pretty well tonight or this could be a trappy game, especially knowing that a couple days ago you just got a chance to win the Big Ten handed back to you. So didn't felt like it was treated as serious as it needed to be. Am I fair to say that?
Yeah, I didn't really feel the trap game. Obviously, like the rec hall is a factor, just a weird situation all around. But I said at some point in the first half, I haven't like rewatched anything. I don't know when it was, but there was a stretch of like maybe a couple of possessions in a row where there was like Harmon gets backdoored. I think there was did they have a stretch where they had like back-to-back dunks off inbounds and like it was like 2 in 2 minutes?
Yeah, it was two in within a, between timeout stretch for sure.
So it was like that stretch. I think we were down like 4 or 6. Like it wasn't even a bad deficit. Still 30 minutes to play in the game, and I said we're losing this game. And obviously, like I just thought that because like the mental mistakes, like it's too much to overcome at that point because they're not gonna like they're probably not gonna change in the second half. So that was like my line of thinking. But then I'm not gonna like claim like when there was 4 minutes left, I still thought we were losing. Like I thought we were winning for sure. Just that collapse was unbelievable. But some of the stuff, like you got to take the full 40 minutes seriously. Like you can't slack off for one half and try to bounce back in the second half, the last 20 minutes, just because you have a great offense and a bunch of great seniors. Like you got to be locked in. Like this is the time of the year where every minute matters, every shot matters. And we've seen that in a couple games now where, especially late game situations, like you miss a shot, team gets a rebound, gets a fast break, they score, and the trend or the pace of the game, like the flow of the game totally changes. Like one shot, one rebound, whatever it is, one hustle play can totally change the game. And I just thought at that Penn State game, like the team just wasn't locked in for the full 40 minutes. And I think the most infuriating part was when Coleman was taking those two free throws with 18 seconds left, whatever it was. I don't know if everybody noticed, but he was like, he didn't get the ball right away from the ref or something. He was pissed about something. And he's standing at the free throw line, like waving his hands, like, what's going on? And then he misses two. He missed the first one, and then he started complaining after the first one, too, before he shot the second one. Missed both, and then fouls the 3-point shooter. Like, that is just a complete lack of focus, lack of discipline, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm glad Brad Underwood had the talk with him after the game. And Brad mentioned that after the Iowa game, after Coleman dropped 30. So I think we're in a better spot all around. We had some tough talks, I'm sure. But yeah, that the lack of focus, lack of discipline, lack of effort, that was not fun to watch at that Penn State game.
How concerned are you about the late game stuff? Because it has happened 3 times in the last 3 weeks. Nebraska, you probably should have lost that game. You're up 10 with 3.5 minutes to go, didn't score until Marcus Damask got fouled on, you could call it a bailout foul with 3 seconds left to send the game to overtime. And then Michigan State, you have a 7-8 point lead with 6-something minutes left. Michigan State storms back. You don't make a field goal for 7 minutes. Michigan State takes that one from you. And now here against Penn State is just about as bad as you'll ever see, blowing a 7-point lead with 34 seconds left. Illinois could not break Penn State's pressure. You had to use back-to-back timeouts to get the ball in. You turn it over twice. You foul a 3-point shooter. You miss free throws. I'm back and forth on it. I think that to me, there's been a little bit of an overreaction in terms of, I like I said, I might be in the minority here. I think there's bigger picture issues than blowing a 7-point lead with 34 seconds left, because I do think that isn't going to happen very often. I think you'd have to literally be DePaul to be worried about that on a daily basis. I think there's too much experience, too many good players on this team for me to be worried if Illinois is in a round of 32 game under a minute left up 7, that I'm going to be like pissing down my leg because Illinois might blow the game. I don't think that's going to happen very often. With that said, we have seen this become a trend here. And you do have some roster flaws, namely being not a true point guard, ball handler that can really, close a game out and handle pressure like that. Is that something, or where does that fall on the list of Illinois concerns heading into March for you?
Number one concern is the abysmal defense. I don't think that's even a question. Like, you give up, no matter how bad your late game struggles are, you give up 80 points with 4 minutes left in the game, you're probably going to lose that game in the NCAA tournament. But obviously, if you want to call it lack of a point guard, if you want to call it just guys not hitting shots late in the game, whatever you want to talk about in regards to late game scenarios, still definitely a major concern. Like, I thought they took a step forward with the road game at Maryland. Harmon made a huge clutch play, got the ball to Hawkins, completely changed the momentum of the game, and Illinois comes out with the win. So I'm kind of torn on it like you. I think it's a major concern overall, but there are it's college basketball. Like, it can be one play that completely changes the game, like we saw at Maryland. It wasn't really that at Penn State. Like, Penn State just strung together a couple stops, a couple really timely shots, hit 3 free throws at the end of the game to win it. So it's odd to me. I don't know. I also just don't understand why we're so bad late in the game. Like, certain games, it's guys are just taking 25 seconds standing around and chucking up a bad shot with 4 minutes left in the game. Sometimes it's awful turnovers. Sometimes it's guys fouling on whatever it is. Like, I don't. It's odd to me. It's a major concern though. I think playing Ty Rodgers, I don't really know how it would help that much. But like, you see a guy like Harmon inbound like just terribly for like a couple games in a row. He can't get a pass in. He has made some clutch plays though, but I want to see Ty Rodgers in the game. Like he's our starting point guard, if you want to call it that. He's the guy that's bringing the ball up for the first like 8 minutes of the game. So why isn't he doing it at the end of the game? I don't really know because the free throw situation's better. I know he's been in foul trouble a little bit recently, which I guess is part of why he's on the bench. But I think there comes a point where like that just doesn't matter in the final 4 minutes of the game where he should just be on the court because I think he's proven to be a decent point guard at this point in the season. So I want to see him on the court. But I don't know. I kind of just went off on a tangent. So I want to hear your thoughts on how, like, do you think we're in trouble in March?
Not because of this single game to me. Again, I think if we don't see defensive improvement by the time March hits, then yes. But just because this singular result happened, I'm not closing the book on this team's chances. I think that it should be a wake-up call. Hopefully it was, and Saturday kind of was as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But again, to me, it's bigger picture stuff. I think you get too caught up in one moment, which was a really bad moment. Part of me almost hopes that it can be and Brad Underwood even said this, like in his pre-Iowa availability, like this team can't just show up and expect that they're going to win, and you can't just coast through the end of games. And part of me almost feels like it could be a motivator and kind of a turning point in a season where Illinois can get hot here, because I think a lot of that stuff is correctable to me. Like, it'd be one thing if this Illinois team's getting blown off the floor in road games, or you can't compete with some of these top teams, or, you know, you're one of these teams, whether it be Nebraska or whoever else it is that has like one road win all season long. And that's a bigger picture issue. Illinois could have won every single game they've played this year. They haven't lost by double digits. They've been in every game. And a lot of these issues are micro issues that are, whether it be the late game problems or whether it be just these singular results. And I know that defense is more of a bigger picture issue, but I still feel like this team is right there. I think the talent is undeniable. The fact that they have all these opportunities to win games, you just got to figure out how to close them. And I think that that's more fixable issue than not being able to compete, or just clearly being a tier below all the teams you're competing against, which Illinois isn't. Illinois can beat anybody, in my opinion, but it does take, just better execution late in games to me. I do want to talk, unless you have any more thoughts on this Penn State game, I do want to talk about Iowa, because I think that some of these things go hand in hand with what we saw. You got anything else on Penn State?
Not really on Penn State, but I don't know. I hope there's a part of me that hopes it's just like a law of averages thing where like we've just choked a bunch of games and maybe with like the tide turns in March. I don't know, something like that. That's what I'm rooting for.
Be nice for sure. And Illinois responded well, I thought. Now, it looked a little dicey here on Saturday against Iowa back at home. It was to me, this was the spot that was going to tell me a lot about where this team is at. If Illinois responded from that Penn State collapse and did not beat Iowa at home and on their home floor, a team that's going to be in the NIT, although maybe they wouldn't have been if they won yesterday, but Illinois made sure that they're pretty much certainly going to be in the NIT after beating them 95-85 on Saturday in Champaign. If Illinois responded and let that one result on Wednesday night spiral into worse and lost on their home floor to Iowa, then I was gonna sit right here and say we got a problem. This team is not going anywhere this year, in my opinion, because it's one of those moments that can just spiral and kind of lead to a collapse. I thought the response was good. Now, you would have liked to see a smoother game that didn't involve all 5 of your starters getting pulled in a hockey line change with 18:06 to go in the game. But I thought the message was received, and Illinois found a way to win this game. They closed this game well. They got into another tighter game late, and this time they closed it pretty smoothly for a double-digit victory. And Nico Moretti and Amani Hansberry and Dane Danger and this bench unit came in and provided a spark for this team. Biggest story was Coleman Hawkins, 30 points, career high, 5 assists, 5 steals. He was fantastic, but got a little deeper into the bench than you normally do, and it was because Brad Underwood was so upset with the way his starters were playing. But the message was received. Illinois found a way to win. how encouraged were you by the response against Iowa following Wednesday?
Obviously, still concerned with the defense, but I don't really want to focus on that right now because we've talked about that so much the past couple of weeks. Let's talk about something positive. Huge contributions from Moretti, from Hansberry. Dane didn't really play well, but it was kind of crucial that he did play a little bit because some other guys were struggling, as we saw. All five starters pulled early in the second half. Other guys, Harmon played really well in the second half after not really playing the first half. Goody didn't do too much, but like still key that he was in there. He had a couple shots, some decent hustle plays, good energy guy as he's always been. But yeah, overall, five guys coming in with 18 minutes left in the half. It's not like they really like stormed back and took a massive lead over Iowa. Like they just did their job, and that led to starters getting some rest, starters getting energized, understanding like, all right, this isn't going to fly anymore. We got to really turn it up at this point in the game and for the rest of the season. And it worked. Like, it still was tied with a couple minutes left. I think 7 minutes left. It was like 75, something like that. But then Illinois did hit some timely shots down the stretch. Guys were motivated. Guys were hustling, getting loose balls, stuff like that. Come out, you get the win. Moretti playing the last few minutes of the game, being the point guard. People on Twitter talking a lot about Moretti. Uh, Moretti being the
Illinois
fix
has
to
had their
late
point guard all along.
Yeah,
Who says we
I
don't
can't
have a
say I'm
point
sold
guard?
on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
I can't
either.
say I'm
I'm
sold
not
on
either.
that, but still good to see, even if it's just one game. That was awesome to see for the future. Like if he's back on the roster next year, you never know if these guys are transferring. Never know who's staying. That would be awesome if he can really turn into at least a solid role player, which it seems like he has potential to do. But back to this season, you needed that win. Guys came in, they contributed off the bench. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not out here saying let's start Moretti. He's your point guard. Illinois had their point guard. What I will say is, I honestly, before yesterday with 18:06 to play, I did not think Moretti could contribute right now at this. I didn't think he was going to get off the bench the rest of the year unless Illinois was blowing Minnesota out on Wednesday. I just didn't think he was ready. And to see him come in and make a big impact on a really pivotal game in the Illinois season is unexpected, but really awesome. And at the very least, it gives you an option. It gives you a guy that now you can feel comfortable trusting if you're Brad Underwood. And if there is some flatness, or if you need a guy who is going to play with a little more pace and be more of a true ball handler, you have that guy that you know can battle. Like the biggest concern with Moretti has always been, is he just going to get eaten alive on the defensive end against high major competition? Now, I think that's still a valid question to ask. He's, what, 6 foot, 160 something. But I thought he played hard and battled, and I thought he just came in and gave the jolt of life that Illinois needed when it was a clear message that was being sent. Illinois came out of the locker room after they had given up a football pass 90 feet down the floor to Peyton Sanford to end the half. Iowa goes into the locker room down one. Illinois couldn't get a stop for most of the first half. Iowa shot like 62% from the floor. And clearly there was a talk in the locker room at halftime with the expectation that the starting five was going to come out and start very strong, very energized, play really hard to start the second half. They did not do that. The first 2 minutes, 0 for 4. All 4 shots came from 3. Iowa was at the rim 3 different times. They had a couple. Owen Freeman got a couple offensive rebounds, and Brad Underwood said, "New 5. We're going hockey line change." All 5 starters out. Wasn't pleased. And like you said, it's not like those 5 guys, the bench unit came in and went on a 15-2 run that won Illinois the game, but they came in, they didn't lose any ground for Illinois, and the message was received that, all right, if this starting group, if my top guys, Coleman, Marcus Damas, Terrence Shannon, even Guerrier and Rogers, although those guys didn't really play much after that regardless, but the message was sent that you guys better go play your ass off right now, or we got a huge problem, because there's no reason that we should be lacking effort on February 24th after collapsing at Penn State. And I thought Illinois came out and played really, really well down the stretch of the game. I thought their defense down the stretch of the game, overall, you give up 85. I thought the first half there was a lot of struggles. But when it mattered in this one, I thought they buckled down and forced some really tough shots for Iowa, which allowed them to pull away. Coleman Hawkins had a couple steals, which led to fast breaks that really got the place energized. He had such an awesome game. That's the biggest story of the game, even though the bench is obviously what people are going to talk about, the story of the game was Coleman Hawkins at his worst game of the year against Penn State and comes back, has 30, has maybe the best game of his career. I know he turned it over a little bit, could have rebounded it a little bit better, but there's no need to nitpick a 30-point performance. He was your MVP of the game. He got off to a quick start with 13. Like, it was clear he wanted to come out and just erase that game from Wednesday. And then after the message was sent by Brad in the second half, he had a heck of a finish to the game that really allowed Illinois to pull away. And Moretti and Justin Harmon closed the game for the last 17 minutes. I think each of them came out for a minute. And other than that, they both played the last 17 minutes. And it was also good to see Harmon, who had such a terrible game Wednesday. He really played with energy, got on the offensive glass, couple layups, couple cuts. He moved without the ball. That's the type of stuff that you needed to see after Wednesday. And obviously you would have liked to not have to have that type of strong message sent where your coach is benching your starters in a game at home against Iowa. Maybe a different discussion to be had there, but at the end of the day, I thought it was a brilliant coaching decision and one that ended up kind of turning the tide on how we feel about this team, because if Illinois had played the way that they played for the first half of the game and either had to squeak one out against Iowa at the end or flat out lost the game, I think it'd be a much different discussion about how it might be panic button time. But for now, I think Illinois responded in the way they needed to.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 as we all get ready for the best month of the year, March Madness. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use the bonus code FIELD150 and you will get $150 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $5 of your hard-earned money. This is how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD150. That's FIELD150. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $150 in bonus bets regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD150 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available in one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in Philly or New York, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create a new account in each state. It's easy, it's simple, and it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the conference tournaments and for the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and my personal favorite, a nice little parlay boost here and there. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today. Big news, guys. I am thrilled to announce that we have partnered with Autograph, a company founded by the GOAT himself, Tom Brady. The Autograph fandom app gives you access to the best college hoops content, fan contests, and exclusive rewards like discounted tickets, all for doing the things that diehard fans like you already do, following your favorite team in the news and listening to podcasts just like this one. When Tom, and yes, I am calling him Tom, we're on a first name basis these days, co-founded Autograph, he had one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. It works like this. You get all of your college hoops content you want in one place. You get articles from your favorite writers, pods from your favorite hosts, contests from your favorite creators, all on the feeds and the sites that you already enjoy. But instead of having to go to all these different places, it all comes to you in one spot, the Autograph fandom app. But here's the best part. The more content that you consume, the higher you rank in the app. As you consider to level up in status on the app, you can unlock unique rewards curated exclusively for you. So download the free Autograph app in the App Store and use the referral code F68, that's F68, or tap in at the link in the description below or in the podcast app of your choosing to start earning points for doing something as normal as listening to this very podcast.
They did for sure. Obviously, winning the game is the huge part. Glad they did that for sure. But the bench contributions were awesome. I think one of my favorite parts about this team is like you said earlier, always being in the game. it's not likely that we could have won every game, but like we had a chance in every game, at least in the second half at some point, just to win that game. Um, but yeah, I just love that this team doesn't really quit. Like individual guys, you see Moretti, like he comes in, probably was not expecting to get in the game at all. He comes in, looks a bit shaky at the start, and then he ends up hitting two threes, being huge down the stretch, making really nice plays, not getting abused on defense really. So it's just awesome to see like guys getting their name called like that. Like Amani Hansberry has barely played the past 2 months. He comes in high energy guy, playing great defense, rebounding, got a bucket, I think. Just stuff like that's awesome to see. Like Dane Danger really couldn't make a shot yesterday, still giving good minutes, still hustling, stuff like that. Like there's been some like individual culture problem, not culture problems, but like attitude problems during Brad Underwood's tenure that I think should be talked about a little bit. Like, you know, the guys not hustling, guys not giving energy. Like last year's team was really struggled with that at some points. But overall, I think this year's team has really showed with the maturity, with the leadership from the older guys. Like we're going to be in every game. We could go down 10. We're still going to be putting up a fight in this game. We're still going to try to claw back in and get a win, steal a win, whatever it may be. So I think that's really one of my takeaways from this game and from the season overall, which I think every fan is really appreciative of.
Yeah, and I want to mention too, for Amani Hansberry, who came in and he's played a little bit more recently. He was hurt with the back spasms. He had like on and off back spasms where he's like questionable on every injury report. Recently, he's been back healthy, played a little bit more, but I thought Saturday's game was the biggest impact he's made this year. And I'm willing to say, and you're right, I thought Danger came in and played hard and gave solid minutes, but Amani Hansberry should be this team's backup center in March, in my opinion. I think he's just better. I think he's a better option. I think you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He's going to play his tail off every time he's in. He only had 4 points, 4 rebounds, but it felt like he had a much bigger impact than that against that Iowa front court too, where they play kind of the two bigs with Owen Freeman and Ben Krikke, and they were getting on the offensive glass way too much with both Dane and Coleman in there. And Amani, I thought, got a couple big-time rebounds, kept them off the glass, played really hard on the defensive end, had a couple buckets as well. He just, I think, and he communicates so well too. When Illinois sits back and drop, which I think Coleman has struggled at a lot and Dane Danger has been brutal at, I think he might be Illinois' best drop coverage defender at the 5 spot, just with how much he communicates and how much he's always using his hands. And he's not maybe a rim protector type, but he's a guy that's just going to kind of be in the right spot, not get out of position. I think he deserves to be the backup 5 in March. What do you think about that?
I like that a lot. And just, I don't want to speculate on Dane leaving, but like, if we're just being realistic, he has seen his role diminished a lot. And just with the transfer portal, with everything, I think
I would not blame him at all if he grad transferred to go start somewhere. I mean,
yeah, I know.
There's certain transfers in this day and age where you're going to be really upset and feel a certain type of way. Jaden Epps. But Dane Danger, I would feel great for if he found a spot where he could really thrive, because he's a good college basketball player. He just doesn't really fit this roster, in my opinion.
He deserves it too. Like he came in, he sat out, he worked his ass off that one off season, and he wasn't great last season, but like offensively, he was way better than anybody expected from the fan base, at least. And I think he hasn't really been appreciated too much. Like the fan base just expects instant buckets, great defense, instant like huge wins from this team. But I think he's worked really hard. He's still a good player, like you said. But I just think for this year, for the rest of this season, I agree with you. I want to see Amani, and just like it's like when DGO and Moretti, when Amani get in the game, we're so used to seeing these 23-year-olds. Nothing against them, but like it's like a breath of fresh air to see the young like 19-year-olds come in. Like just seeing a new face on the court, they get a rebound, they get a steal, anything that they do that's positive. Like the crowd goes crazy. The fans just love it. They love seeing the young guys win, make winning plays, stuff like that. So I think, and it's not like they're bad players or anything. Like Amani comes in and he actually makes plays. DGL gets buckets too. Moretti has just shown that he can make plays offensively for this team for the rest of the season. So yeah, I agree with you. I want to see Amani in. I'm not totally sold on like Moretti being the starting point guard. Obviously, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think it's realistic for him to play like 15 minutes a game either. But like if he can come in, run the pick and roll, not get targeted on defense too much. Like he could be a solid contributor for this team for the next month or so, and that would be awesome. But yeah, back to your point, I think Amani should be taking Dane's minutes realistically, but we'll see if that happens or not.
Yeah, I mean, if Moretti's going to make 100% from three, which is what he's shooting right now, then
Yeah,
maybe he should play all 40. But no, I agree with you totally. I just think Amani has proven that he is a more capable backup five, whereas I don't know if Nico Moretti, based on 17 minutes of one game, has proven he's going to take Harmon's minutes or Goody's minutes or anything. I think that there is a clear upgrade there from Dane to Amani that I want to see that happen. And based on the way Brad was talking about Amani after the game, compared him to Io DeSunmu as a trash talker and an energy guy.
that
I
was
mean,
crazy.
Brad has never been one to shy away from some lofty comparisons, but that makes me think maybe he is going to play quite a bit more. So I've been really impressed with him, even if he's not going to, put up the numbers that even Dane is. Like there's going to be a production discrepancy there, but I think that some of the, stuff that doesn't go in the box score, I feel like Amani plays better than an 18-year-old would, especially at the center spot, a really tough defensive position. So that's just one observation I had, but yeah, Illinois beats Iowa. They moved to 11-5 in the Big Ten, 20-7, fifth straight year of 20 wins. I just want to take one moment for all the people that were flooding social media on Wednesday night, and you have the right to be frustrated about blowing that game. But Brad Underwood just put together his fifth 20-win season in a row at Illinois. The only other Illinois coach to do that was Lou Henson back in the 80s. And I just want to take a moment to just kind of realize what that is and the consistency that he's brought to this Illinois program. Illinois is probably going to be a top four seed in the NCAA tournament for the third time in the last four seasons. If COVID hadn't gotten canceled, 5 straight NCAA tournament appearances. Brad Underwood is the second best coach in Illinois basketball history, and I don't think that I just want to take a moment here because I'm so fed up every time I see all this BS go around. And I know you feel the same way as me, but it's a cool milestone. I know 20 wins doesn't mean what it used to because now we break it down in quads and, Ken Pom and net and KPI and all this stuff. But 20-win season means, if for 5 straight years, means you brought a level of consistency and success to a program. And I know the next step is moving on in the NCAA tournament, but that's pretty cool too.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think we've both been part of the issue too. Like everybody is, like, even as it's not our job, but like it's kind of our role to talk about the team, like game to game struggles, stuff like that. But like when you look back at the bigger picture, us as like 19, 20-year-olds, we witnessed some really terrible teams. Like we were 1 years old for the 2005 D Brown, Darren Williams, Luther had Illini. Like we have not seen tournament success. We have not seen Big Ten success. And then Brad Underwood came around, completely changed the culture, changed the program, changed the record. Just remember the games back in like 2019 where it's like, oh yeah, Illinois has not beat Wisconsin in the Kohl Center in a decade and a half, and then now we've won like 8 in a row against that team in general. Like just the tone around the program has completely changed. It's difficult not to get caught up in, oh, this guy's not making shots the past 10 games. This guy hasn't played a lick of defense for the past 2 years. Like, yeah, you can complain about that. But when you look back at the bigger picture, like Illinois is back. They're going to be back in tournament contention every year. They're back in Big Ten title contention every year. They're recruiting at an elite level. Yeah, I don't know. There's really fun players, like all American caliber players, all Big Ten caliber players, really great role players coming in from the portal every year. So it's awesome. It's an awesome time to be an Illini fan, and yeah, I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, what that's going to be, well, it probably won't be, unfortunately, for matters that don't relate to basketball, but it would have been had Terrence Shannon not gone to Kansas in September. It would have been 4 All-Americans in 5 years, or 3 and 4, because it was 3 and 4 because Io was an All-American, then Kofi, and then Terrence absolutely is a top 5 player in the country this year. But it'll remain to be seen, what the voting looks like there. I get it, but that's pretty cool too. And again, I realize, and a lot of people are probably going to hear this and be like, well, you got all those All-Americans and you don't have any tournament success to go with that. But just keep putting top-seeded teams in the tournament, and there's so much that has to go your way, whether it be draw, whether it be, you have a terrible shooting night, whatever it is. Like, if you just keep putting top 4 seeds in the tournament like Brad Underwood is, he's going to make a run. Like, it's there's nothing that he's doing, in my opinion, that's like, well, he's just screwing the team over in March. It's just sometimes it's the luck of the draw. And I still think this team has a chance as well. So we'll get a better picture of that, though, the next couple weeks. Do want to preview this week of hoops. 2 more games for Illinois. Back at home against the Minnesota Golden Gophers on Wednesday night, 8 o'clock. That is a quad 3 game. Your only non-quad 1 game left, so one that you just got to win. Take care of business before you head into a 3-game stretch to close the season that includes 3 quad 1 games, 2 of them on the road against Wisconsin and Iowa, and the other one being the number 2 ranked Purdue Boilermakers at home. And so you got Minnesota this week, Wednesday night, and then Saturday at noon, the Kohl Center, Wisconsin at Wisconsin, a team that's kind of been struggling here recently, but it's definitely going to be a tough game. You did mention Illinois 6 in a row against Wisconsin after I think they lost 14 straight before that. So pretty incredible turn of the tide in that rivalry. But what are you going to be looking for this week? Obviously, the Minnesota game's just one. That's a better Minnesota team, but you got to take care of that one. The Wisconsin game is going to be a huge opportunity for Illinois if we still want to have discussions about moving up to a 3 seed or keeping your tournament standing here around that 4 seed line. Picking up a quad 1 road win against Wisconsin would go a long way.
For sure. I like your point. Just for the Minnesota game, at least, just don't have a complete collapse like the Penn State game. Like, it's not going to help your resume in terms of a huge quad 1 victory, stuff like that, but it could hurt your resume. It could hurt your Big Ten, like, seeding chances, could hurt your chances of getting a top 4 protected seed in March, stuff like that. But just in terms of inside the game itself, I want to see, like, I'd like if there's a comfortable lead or something like that, I'd like to see DGL, Moretti, Amani playing a bit more extended minutes, because it could be kind of crucial down the stretch of this season to have guys like unlock their potentials, get off the bench a little bit more, have guys in your back pocket that you could use at certain points in March, in Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament. So I'd like to see a little bit, of course, improved defense. I think that goes without saying at this point, because we've stressed it so much the past month or so. So improved defense, honestly, just really good energy too. Like, it can be easy to grab a win at Iowa, or grab a win against Iowa at home, which is a pretty big win. Good energy, good team morale win. And it can be kind of easy to just fall back and like expect to win a game against a lower tier Minnesota team, kind of like we saw when we took the trip to Penn State a couple days ago. So yeah, just improved defense, of course, high energy, like none of these mental mistakes, getting backdoored, getting allowing alley-oops off of inbounds plays, stuff like that we've seen a little bit recently. And I think my one wish would just be to see like the bench unlocked a little bit more, because seeing the bench against Iowa was really fun, and it did honestly help the team quite a bit.
I'll tell you what, Minnesota's a heck of a lot better team than Indiana this year, and Illinois was tied with Indiana with 1:20 to go. So you still need to come out and play well. This isn't your average Minnesota team where you play your C- game and you win by 15 like that. That's not the case this year. They got a solid team. They got some transfers in there. Dawson Garcia, a guy that Illinois targeted a couple off seasons ago, having a great year. Cam Christie, the freshman. Elijah Hawkins, talk about a true point guard. He's one of the better passers in the country. So Minnesota's played well this year. They're not a tournament team, but they're one that, what are they? They have 8 Big Ten wins this year. What's their record in Big Ten play? Should have it, but wasn't prepared. I started making a point without being prepared for the answer. That's always not good. But
the point is they're good, though.
They're good, yeah. They're a solid team. They can give you trouble. They've been good at home. Obviously, on the road, a little bit different story. But point being, Illinois can't sleepwalk through it like they have in some of these home games. But that is one you absolutely cannot afford to lose heading into that 3-game stretch afterwards. But the Wisconsin game is going to be the huge one. And it's going to be a test. Wisconsin has struggled here recently. They've had some similar issues that Illinois has had. Their offense hasn't been quite as good, and their defense hasn't been quite as bad. But a similar trend in that they've really struggled to stop people here recently over this stretch where they've lost, I think, 5 of their last 7. And now at home against Illinois, it's going to be a big opportunity for them because they're sitting right below Illinois when it comes to tournament projection. I think they're a current 5 seed. Illinois is still clinging on to that 4 line in most brackets. So it's going to be a huge game to get a team like Illinois, a quad 1 game at home. You know they're going to come to play. Kohl Center, I know Illinois won 3 in a row there, I think. But that is still always a tough play, especially on a Saturday. Should be juiced up in there. It was great when they played Purdue on a Sunday earlier this year. I expect it's going to be a really tough atmosphere for Illinois to go into. And they've got a really experienced team, too. And I'm excited to watch the Terrence Shannon, A.J. Storr matchup. I think that's going to be an awesome matchup. Both those guys have been great this year. But I don't know. It feels like this core Wisconsin group with the Chucky Hepburn and the Tyler Wall and Stephen Crowell. Illinois just kind of had their number. Like I just think it's a solid matchup for Illinois, it's tough. How confident are you that Illinois can go into Wisconsin and win? I feel like if you asked this question 3 weeks ago, it'd be a different answer. I still think it's going to be tough, but I think Illinois should win this game. I think they should win this game against this current version of Wisconsin. Am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy, but I don't know. Just like during the Brad Underwood era, since we've had Iowa, at least I've thought that Illinois has been more talented than Wisconsin every single year. I think it's been 4 or 5 years. I'm kind of biased because I don't like anything about Wisconsin. Like they have like they're kind of like Purdue, but like worse. I like they don't have 7-footers, but they have like 3-star guys that come in and play defense. They play the right way. Like Greg Gard he just develops them, and like by their 4th year, they're just like 15-5 Big Ten team. And they're not that talented on paper ever. I will say AJ Storr is really talented. Like he's an awesome player that could be getting NBA draft looks this offseason. But like my point still stands. I think we're better on paper than this team. I think we've been playing better recently than them because they've had major issues losing 5 of 7. The home court advantage in Madison is pretty nice for them though. Like that place does get pretty rowdy when they need to get rowdy. So that's a concern, I would say. Just playing on the road in the Big Ten is a concern. We've talked about that the entire season. Illinois is one of the better road teams in the Big Ten, and I think they're 4-4, I want to say. So that's like 500, and that's one of the best road teams in the Big Ten. But I do think Illinois can win this game, and I think without a late game collapse, I think they do win this game.
Yeah, and with that said, that road record, 4-4, being second in the Big Ten is kind of crazy. But also, they could be 7-1, like pretty easily. And I'm not saying they should have won all these games because they lost them. But at Northwestern, Marcus DeMass makes a shot he's made like 15 times this year. You win that one. Michigan State, you led by 7 with 5 minutes left, and you couldn't buy a bucket. And then obviously, I mean, there's no excuse for losing that Penn State game. I mean, Illinois has played extremely well relative to really the entire country on the road this year. Even you go back to Tennessee, that's a team that's a Final Four contender. Illinois led that at halftime, and we're one big Tennessee second half run from really being right in that in the final minutes. So they've gone out, and I think Illinois played pretty inspired basketball, played pretty hard on the road for the most part. They haven't been intimidated by some of these environments. The numbers Terrence Shannon's putting up on the road has been really impressive, given everything that is getting chanted his way and what a road environment can do to him. 35 at Rec Hall with some of the stuff that was being said. Craziness. He's been awesome. So I feel pretty good. Again, and I've said it before, I almost sometimes feel better about the way this team looks on the road than they do in their own building, which may be good, may be bad. I don't know. It's tough to tell, but yeah, it's going to be a tough game against Wisconsin, but it's a Wisconsin team that looks a lot more vulnerable. I agree. I think Illinois is the far more talented team. I'd probably AJ Storr's good, but I think Illinois has 3 of the 4 best players on the floor in this game against Wisconsin, and I think it's going to be close. But I think this is a great opportunity for Illinois that. Give yourself kind of a little bit of breathing room. I think the Big Ten title thing, that's off the table after you collapse against Penn State. So that Purdue game is just more so going to be a big opportunity for your resume. But if you go to Madison and win and get that quad one win, the pressure then is a little bit less for when Purdue comes to town. And we know how tough that matchup is going to be with how good that Purdue team is. So could be a great opportunity to kickstart that 3-game quad one stretch with a win against Wisconsin. Anything else that I'm missing from this week or the week ahead?
Not that I can think of. I don't know. Like, it was the Penn State game, terrible, pretty much all around, but you bounced back with Iowa, and now it's a pretty big 4-game stretch. Like, I was thinking, we had that episode a couple weeks back saying this stretch in February is crucial. You got 8 games against like mid to low tier teams in the Big Ten for the most part. You want to go 7-1. You want to go 8-0. Right now they're at 5-2. You lost a game at Michigan State. You beat Maryland on the road, which was nice. You just beat Iowa at home, which was nice. And then, of course, the Penn State collapse. This Minnesota game's the last part of that 8-game stretch. I think I said I wanted 7-1. Like, of course, I want 8-0, but I think I said 7-1 would have been nice, and 6-2 would have been acceptable. So you get this Minnesota win, and you're sitting at 6-2. Now you got a pretty vulnerable Wisconsin team on the road. Still going to be a tough game, but it looks more winnable than it did about a month ago. So I think overall, I think Illinois is still in a pretty good position. The loss at Penn State was awful. Like, we don't need to spend more time talking about it, but overall, I think this team is still in decent position.
I think I said last week that my main goal for the rest of the season is I want to be a 3 seed in the tournament, because I think that makes such a huge difference from being a 4 or 5. What do you think Illinois needs to do to get to that 3 line? Obviously, losing at Penn State, a quad 2 game, really hurt. What would it look like? I think if Illinois goes 2-1 in that quad 1 game stretch, obviously you beat Minnesota, and then you don't take a loss to some average team in the Big Ten tournament, I think they'll be right in contention for it.
I think you're a little more optimistic than I am, like, because were we the 15th out of 16 on that reveal? Because that's
Yes.
like lower tier. That's lower tier 4 seed. I know some of the 4 seeds around us have lost. Like,
Yep.
some teams have been struggling, like we have a little bit. But I don't know. You beat Purdue, you beat Wisconsin. I mean, you've got 3 quad 1 opportunities in a row, and then the Big Ten tournament, which is, it kind of sucks that the Big Ten tournament ends on Sunday because it's tough for the committee to judge. Like,
Yeah, the
if
Big
Illinois
Ten title result doesn't do anything for the bracket.
I know, because I was kind of thinking if we like beat Purdue twice in the next 3 weeks, that would be awesome, or that would be huge for the resume. But like, I don't know how much that would really affect it. So I think we're kind of stuck in the 4 line, to be honest. I don't know how much more we can do to get to the 3 line, which makes me pissed about a couple of years back when we were ahead of Wisconsin in the committee reveal, and then we played better than them in the final 3 weeks of the season, and then Wisconsin jumped us and played a first round games in Milwaukee. So yeah, sorry for that tangent, but that pissed me off.
Yeah, that was brutal. And of course, Illinois faces Houston, who's like 3rd in Ken Pom in the round of 32, a team that was probably a Final Four caliber team. And I think Wisconsin got Iowa State and Colgate.
Yeah.
Illinois gets Chattanooga and Houston. That definitely hurt. Wouldn't you think, though, that let's say Illinois beats Purdue at home, which is obviously about as good a win as you can get, and then they split the 2 road games with Wisconsin and Iowa, and then they get to Sunday, they meet Purdue in the Big Ten championship, which the result of that one probably doesn't count. But in that case, you wouldn't be taking another bad loss. You would have 2 more quad 1 wins, including a win against Purdue, and then you're probably on Friday of the Big Ten tournament beating like Michigan State or Iowa or somebody, and then on Saturday you're beating Wisconsin again, and you get to Sunday against Purdue. Don't you think that gets you to the 3 line? Obviously, it depends on what other teams do. I still think there's hope there, because I've honestly been surprised. I thought Illinois was going to drop to a 5 seed after losing to Penn State. Almost every bracket I've looked at still has them on the 4 line, which means they're 3 to 4 spots away from the 3 line. And if you go up to that Sunday Big Ten championship game and you're what? Would that be 5-1 with 3 quad 1 wins added? I think you still have a path.
There's a chance, yeah. I think something to look at is also like, where does Maryland's net ranking end? Where does Ohio State's net ranking end? Because that's 2 quad 1 wins right now and a quad 2 loss at Maryland or at home versus Maryland. So that's huge too. I don't know. It's a lot of hypotheticals. Like, I guess there is a chance they get to the 3 line, which would be huge. Like playing a 6 in the second round, playing a 14 in the first round, massive compared to a 4 seed, like we talked about last week, I think. So that would be awesome. I don't know. Still a lot to happen. I think there's a chance, but I think realistically, Illinois ends on the 4 line.
Yeah, that's probably true. We'll see what happens. Obviously, beating Wisconsin would go a long way. We will be back next week. It'll be March. That'll be crazy to be recording a March episode after all this time of talking about March for 2 months. And it'll finally be here next time we record. So we will be back to talk Illinois, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, look ahead to that Purdue game on March 5th here in Champaign, and start to talk some postseason basketball, some March Madness. That is going to be awesome. We might release a couple extra episodes during the postseason, especially since it falls around spring break. So stay tuned for that. But for now, make sure to drop a follow on our Twitter account at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to our YouTube, to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel to never miss our episodes. Find us on any podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else you listen to podcasts. You can find us, and we'll be back next week. Let's have a clean 2-0 week with no 7-point collapses in 30 seconds, and not have to discuss that next week. That would be preferable. But until then, we will talk to you next week right here on the Champagne on Ice podcast. Have a great